Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your host, Eric Tait, and we're happy to have with us again Dr. Alan Singer. Dr. Singer, tell our folks some of your credentials for those who haven't been with you.
All right. I'm a teacher, educator, and historian at House University. I'm also a former New York City high school teacher and lifetime resident of the city. And thank you very much for having me today.
Always glad to have your expertise. Bob is off on an assignment. I think he's at the CES convention out in LA doing what he does when it comes to tech and media and gadgets. And Raymond's still not able to rejoin us for a while due to personal commitments. So it's the two of us doing what we're doing, being brought to you folks by EVT Educational Productions, Zoom, and maybe if MNN has got its act together at its new location, it'll show up on Manhattan Neighborhood Network next Monday. We're taping it Wednesday, January 4th. So the following Monday, it may air on MNN, and we'll let folks know. New year, new quote, not new deal, but new year, new government. And so we might as well jump off with the fact that the United States government seems to be already in a quandary because the House of Representatives can't seem to elect an incoming speaker now that it's under Republican control. And so what we're seeing is an internal dogfight amongst Republican hard right-wingers and the rest of the quote Republican caucus. Alan, what so far, what?
Well, I think the Republican caucus starts on the right and just gets righter and righter and righter and right, or wronger, as you would say, until it falls off the cliff. What's become very clear is that the party is a coalition that includes a lot of lunatics who have no commitment to governing, and their program is basically to burn it all down. And I don't know what they imagine will come next, because they have not articulated anything. But what has happened right now, while we're speaking, they're having the 5th vote for speaker, and it requires a majority vote. Now, the Democrats cannot have a majority vote because they don't have a majority any longer. But the Republicans have not been able to put together a majority because approximately 20 lunatics in the fringe of the Republican Party, who that party has invited into the United States government and has supported and endorsed, are blocking any effort to open up the United States House of Representatives. Now, before the House can operate, it has to put in charge a Speaker of the House, the person who sets the agenda. And that's the person from the majority party. Mm-hmm. This kind of block has not happened since the 1920s, 100 years ago.
100 years, right.
And that is because the Republican Party is not a political party at all, but it's a coalition, again, that runs from moderate conservatives to lunatics. Now, if those lunatics have their way, I can't imagine how the more moderate Republicans are going to be able to sit with them. Yeah. I don't know how they could stomach it.
But there have been a couple of things floated during this standoff. I saw one report a couple of days ago where somebody reminded the general public, and myself included, that a Speaker of the House doesn't necessarily have to be an elected person in the House of Representatives. Yeah. It could be anyone that's been nominated and then voted on by the House body. And so I saw a story where somebody thought that a reasonable Republican like John Kasich, who was former governor, I forget which
Ohio, I believe,
or one of those Midwest states, they floated his name as a candidate, as a reasonable individual that both Democrats and Republicans could actually support. And it's a not novel, but a logical theory that they probably won't go for because the Republicans don't go for anything that's logical. But I did see another story where the Ohio representative, the lady who is now the longest serving member of the House, Mary, I forget her last name, but she said she's a Democrat. She said she's thinking that it might be smart for the Democrats to come up with the additional votes that Kevin McCarthy needs, put him over the top so that the House could actually start to function, because we got no government. We can't function. You can't even swear in the new people without a House Speaker to set the agenda, to set the swearing in. And so her thought was, hey, you know, we're Democrats. We want to see things done. We don't have to vote with them, but we can vote with them to elect the speaker so we can get business started. I liked her idea, but I don't think the Republicans would like her plan either. What do you think?
No, it's a very interesting idea, you know, that we need a functioning government. And it may, at some point, you know, look, we've seen this in some of the European and the Israeli governments, where parties, in order to take control, have accepted the lunatic fringe. And
like Netanyahu in Israel.
Exactly. And I just find it very, very dangerous precedent that that's what's going on in the United States. Because, you know, what people don't remember or recognize, no one remembers anymore, but Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler came to power because their fringe parties eventually became amongst the larger parties in their parliaments, and they took power. And then once they were in power, they dismantled democracy.
Yep.
And we're looking at a very similar fringe in the United States today.
So what's the hangup? Kevin McCarthy can't get the votes he needs. I don't really like Kevin McCarthy. You and I have had discussions before, and on Media Watch, we've talked about the fact that Kevin McCarthy is a craven coward who basically called out Donald Trump for the insurrection and then totally did a 180 about face and went down, genuflected, kisses, whatever we said he kissed. And so he got his imprimatur. And so now the same Dodo is saying to the rest of the Republicans, vote for McCarthy, vote for McCarthy. But the option that they floated yesterday was Jim Jordan, and he's an insurrectionist, a better. Yes. He's also a coward who didn't deal with young men being assaulted sexually when he was in coaching some college in Ohio sometime.
He's a wrestling coach, I believe.
So, yeah, so you got two cowards, an insurrectionist, a better, and if that's the kind of people that they're voting for speaker, it's no wonder nobody is from that party has challenged this crazy guy, this charlatan con man, George Santos, who's sitting there waiting to be sworn in, and he can't be sworn in because they can't come up with a speaker, but we don't want him sworn in. So, hey, what? So tell us a little bit more about Mr. Santos. What's the latest on him?
Well, this is very funny, but George Santos was just elected to represent Queens and Nassau County, United States House of Representatives. And it was said that he won, and I really think he was elected partly because of the bad campaign run by Governor Hochul. And what happens is, so those districts voted against her, and they voted for Lee Zeldin, and he got the spillover vote. But no one really knew who he was. Well, now it turns out that whatever he said he was a lie. He said he graduated, he went to NYU and Baruch College. He didn't. He said he worked for Citibank and I think Goldman Sachs, and he didn't. He said he was a big realtor, and he isn't.
Right.
And the other thing, and this you just mentioned to me, as a young man, he was arrested in Brazil. And charged with fraud and stealing a checkbook. And he confessed, but he was never prosecuted because he escaped.
He fled.
Well, this is very funny, but I was watching Stephen Colbert last night, and Colbert is going through the whole litany of his lies. And he said, you know, what a very clever move. Here you are wanted under indictment in Brazil, and you're going to hide by running for the United States Congress. Well, you said Brazil now knows where he is.
Looking for him, they're coming after him. But
Well,
my point is, this guy is an outright, he admitted to using that checkbook and fraudulently buying stuff or whatever. So that's why they want him, and they'd probably prosecute him. He'd probably get a slap on the wrist, but he's still a fugitive, and he lied about all that, and he got elected, and so everybody's quiet about his background. Kevin McCarthy hadn't said anything. Jim Jordan hasn't said anything. They all, because they've got such a small majority in the House, that they definitely don't want to do a new election, because he might not win and they may not have that seat. But it speaks to the difference between both parties, because when Al Franken did whatever he did in the Senate, all these senators jumped up and said, "You did something bad, you got to go." And Al Franken resigned that Senate seat, remember? And so nobody's asking for this guy to, no, resign, step down, you're a crook, you're a charlatan. And that's the difference in the two parties. And so when this House and this government, the Democrats are lucky that they have a 51-seat majority, but it may not be a majority because you got Sinema, who's quote now an independent, who knows what she's going to do. Joe Manchin is still there, so who knows how much that majority is going to work. They still don't have breathing room in the Senate as far as I'm concerned. I said that when they claimed that they had the control of the Senate when it was 50-50. And we kept saying on Media Watch, no, they have no control. They barely can put a 50-50 tie. And then they got two people who vote with the Republicans and stymie their agenda. So even though they supposedly have a majority, I'm saying they don't have a majority. They have a paper majority. Let's see what happens in the actual governing.
You know, I was watching the fourth vote, and it opened up today. First, they had a very sanctimonious prayer, and then they all stood and they pledged to the flag. And then one of the Republicans gets up and gives a speech on how this is not just the greatest country in the world today, this is the greatest country in history of the world. And then they had a clown show. This is the clown show that was taking place is a total embarrassment of the United States to the world. And again, this comes after the January 6th insurrection. It's just another failure of government in this country. I mean, you mentioned, we were talking earlier, that the wrap-up of the January 6th report.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, I know the mayor of DC, when they released her testimony, and basically one of the things that came out, the report focused a lot on Donald Trump fomenting an insurrection and his cohorts aiding and abetting an insurrection. And that's what they sent over to the Justice Department. Where they failed to actually lean in was the fact that even though they had amazing intelligence about the fact that this stuff might turn out badly with a lot of violence, the mayor said that stuff was not conveyed properly. And it wasn't acted upon in the right way because the people that were being the law enforcement community thought that these MAGA insurrectionists were going to be nice to the police. They were not going to be assaulting the police, that they were friendly to police. And basically, that's why they didn't act as they should. And a lot of the intelligence wasn't passed between agencies. And the guy who was head of the DC police or the House police, I forget his name, his transcript indicated that his testimony said that had those insurrectionists been Black, the response would have been totally different. The intelligence would have been passed much better, and they would have been more proactive in stopping that kind of assault. Okay, and then General Milley's transcript that came out, he basically looked at what was going on and said to some of his staff members, "This looks like a Reichstag moment," referring to Hitler's people when they were getting ready to take over The,
Well, they burned down the Parliament building in Berlin so they could declare a national crisis
Mhm.
and then suspend democracy.
That's exactly what Milley was referring to. And so those are interesting transcript elements that I made sure I took a look at and decided it's something we should put in historical perspective. So I'm glad you're here to help us do that. But within the context of trying to come into the new year, let's segue. There are a couple of other stories that I think maybe we should touch on with the little time we have left. I think we got at least maybe 12 minutes left. So that should be enough to cover some of these topics. We can always circle back around to how worthy is Kevin McCarthy to be speaker? How worthy is any of the current Republican candidates are to be speaker? But within the context of where we're sitting right here in New York, taping this show, we're what, low 60s, high 50s. We're talking.
It's over 60 degrees right now while we're talking.
Yeah. So you've got some interesting things to deal with. Talk about where we are on this climate issue and the other issue about us decimating the species on the planet. Those two, I think, go together.
Well, people keep asking, including me, what happened to winter? Because 2 weeks ago it was frigid, and now it's like it's January, it's April and January.
Yeah.
And what's happening, and this is all related to climate change, and it is impacting on different regions of the world somewhat differently.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, there's cold air, really cold air trapped at the poles. And there are upper level air flow, which keeps the cold there.
Usually it's controlled by the jet stream, usually.
Yes, but the jet stream is not a flat.
Mm-hmm.
The jet stream is what we call a sine curve. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up and down.
And
Well,
it
when the
shifts.
jet stream is down, Arctic winds come south. When the jet stream is up, tropical winds come north. Well, one of the things that's happening because of climate change is that the jet stream curve is deeper. Well, that means that when the jet stream is at a valley, we're getting more and more Arctic air. That was 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
When the jet stream is at a peak, we're getting more and more tropical air. And that's today, Wednesday, January
4th.
Mm-hmm. Check my watch.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is that 2 weeks from now, we're going to hit another valley and we're going to get a really cold piece. So while the overall climate of the Earth is warmer, its impact is so erratic.
Yeah.
One of the things that's taking place, and we're in New York, we don't experience it right now, but California is being hit with intense rain floods. And what's happening over the Pacific, in the hot, warmer air and warmer water over the Pacific is forming what they call atmospheric rivers. Mm-hmm. Tremendous volumes of water sweeping across the Pacific, hitting the Sierra Nevada and Rocky Mountains and dumping it on California. Well, California is glad it doesn't have a drought right now.
Yeah, they need all the water they can get because they're in a
right now they have
drought.
Floods.
Yeah.
And they also have mudslides.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not clear that water is going to stay or it's just going to run off.
Yeah.
But again, we're looking at more and more extreme weather.
Well, that same flooding is going on in Pakistan. There's
Yes.
a whole big story about Pakistan dealing with these ultra floods, and they understand it has to do with climate change. And one of the reports I saw, they were faulting the government's lack of preparedness and how they did or did not reach out to their general population. Of course, the lowest on the totem pole economically, they're the ones that were suffering most. Just like in this country, all those indigenous communities, like the folks up in Alaska and those villages, they'll have to pack up and move their villages inland. One of the things that this omnibus bill that they just voted on was actually giving money, badly needed money, to help some of those communities relocate because of climate change.
Now, one of the things that I'm hypothesizing, but because this enormous amounts of water is coming, if it was colder, it would come down as snow. Well, if it came down as snow and lasted over the winter, in the spring you would be having melting.
Yeah.
So you'd be spreading out the water.
It would help the drought. That's exactly right.
But because it's coming down as rain and not snow, it's just being washed out in these tremendous floods.
Yeah. So yeah, we got this climate change thing that's not getting any better in 2023. I just saw a report, you saw it, that conference that they had, that global conference, about the fact that 75% of the biodiversity of species on the planet, was that the figure? 75% is being destroyed, will be gone within like the next 10, 15 years. What was
it's closer to I think they're looking at 2021, so the end of the century.
Whoa. But they're saying that difficult to turn that clock back. And of course, it's
possible. Once you're extinct, you're extinct.
It's us, man-made, causing the problem. And the conference that signed whatever declaration they signed, we're not part of it and did not sign it. But guess what? The declaration they signed 10 years before, they didn't act on that either. So what does that tell us?
2 countries in the whole world did not sign on that pact: the Vatican and the United States. In the United States, argument is, well, we don't really believe the other countries are going to follow, so we're not going to.
Yeah, well, they're actually right, but that's no reason to not sign, because if you sign, that might influence other people to actually follow.
What we've done is we've destroyed the ability of the United States to influence people on climate change, to influence people on extinction, because the United States refuses to sign treaties and has not signed any of the climate change treaties.
We could blame the Trump administration for the last bit, but why wasn't the Biden administration at this conference to deal with it? Because it
Well, they weren't allowed. They could only have observer status because they hadn't signed the treaty.
Oh, okay. So
apparently the other countries thought that would be hypocritical to let them participate if they weren't going to participate.
Right. That's a vicious circle there. But anyway, so the other thing that I think we should touch on is the fact that in 2023, a whole bunch of new laws are coming into effect. And an umbrella article that I noticed was the fact that now, because the United States Supreme Court has just about thrown out New York's gun laws, which is one of the toughest gun laws, every other state in the union decided, well, we can't pass any laws that are going to restrict gun control. So now at least 50 states in the union allow people to carry guns without permits. They don't have to take any tests. They don't have to do anything about learning gun safety. They don't have to deal with safeguarding the weapon in the house, protecting ammunition from young people, whatever. You just say, go buy a gun and carry it because Second Amendment says you can. 50 states now allow that. What does that tell us about the fate of the country and big cities like New York, even though New York is trying its best to push back against the Supreme Court ruling?
Look, what New York, New Jersey, the metropolitan area states are all trying to find ways to limit gun access to dangerous people within the bounds of the recent Supreme Court decision. And then as soon as they pass the law, it's put on hold by the lower courts until it's adjudicated.
Right.
It's a very frightening thing. And I mean, there's a whole range of things that are taking place. For example, there's the problem of ghost guns. Companies are selling guns in pieces that you could assemble, but because they're not whole guns, they don't fall under the law. People are making plastic guns on copy machines. I mean, just other countries are looking at the United States and they're saying, what kind of leader does this country provide? It's a very, very frightening scenario. And, you know, you and I were older, but I've got grandkids, and
Me too.
I'm looking at their future, and I find it very, very frightening.
Yeah. We're talking about the difference in priorities. I know one of the articles I read said that the Democrats' priorities were dealing with not just inflation, but climate change, the issue of guns, and what to do about getting more stringent gun laws passed, and a number of other issues germane to the health and well-being of the population. The Republicans are talking about investigations of Hunter Biden's laptop and
I think they want to reinvestigate the Lincoln assassination
yeah, right.
and the disputed election of 1884.
Yeah, it's a night and day difference on what's the priorities of the two parties. So I think we got about 2 minutes left. What do you see coming out of this new government, if anything, and what's the difficulty we're going to face with things like debt ceiling and issues like that? Because most of these people, like Jim Jordan, they're the ones who stymied and almost put the country in its full faith and credit in danger back under Obama, when Jim Jordan and his people took over the what was it called, the Freedom Caucus? Yeah. So if they're the ones that are stymieing McCarthy, when he gives in to them in the next minute, what are we looking forward to?
Well, we did see what happened in the last years of the Obama administration, when the Republicans were able to take over both the House and the Senate. And one of the things that they basically prevented any legislation from being passed.
Okay.
President Obama was able to, through executive order, basically keep the government going. But the problem with executive orders is that the next president just can suspend them, which is what Donald Trump did. So I expect in the next 2 years, as Congress is stymied, we're going to see President Biden attempting to keep the government going through executive order. But again, those are only temporary measures that can easily be overturned.
All righty. Well, I guess that about sums it up. We're about out of time. Once again, folks, this has been Media Watch. I'm your host, Eric Tait.
As guest and friend, Alan Singer.
Thanks for joining us, Dr. Singer, and we'll catch you the next time, folks. Stay safe.